Good afternoon, and Year 5, and welcome to today's English lesson. Okay, so this is today's Ella to write and perform a debate, and then today's date, which is Wednesday, the 10th of February. So what we're going to do, first of all, I'm just going to run through chapter 5 for us, so the last chapter that we read, or was it chapter 6 even? And yeah, and then we'll read together the chapter after that, and then there's a task that I'd like you to do. So first of all, I'm just going to run through the chapter so that we read in the last lesson, okay, so that we have that, because you're going to need to refer back to that chapter for your task later on. Okay, and that is obviously the end of that chapter. So before we begin and before we look at chapter 7 and this image and what this image might show, now I want to just have a quick recap, a reminder of what happened in chapter 6, this one that we've just ran through now. Okay, so I just want to remind you that Circe obviously told Odysseus and his crew that he needs to go on this journey and there will be dangers throughout their journey. Okay, so they've already experienced the Song of the Spheres, hearing that really beautiful music. And there were other things that Circe warned them about. So a six-headed dragon was one of them, and a whirlpool that can suck in the boat. Okay, and she said that you need to sacrifice some of your men during this travel. You have to go on this travel to sacrifice your men so that you and others can survive. Okay, so I just wanted to remind people that we're going to need that information for later on. So looking at the next chapter then, so we've got chapter 7 here then. We've got an image here of some weird looking creature. So what do you think is going to happen in this picture? What do you think this creature is? What do you think it might do? Okay, what do you think it will do in our book today? So Torment and Trial, chapter 7 of The Adventures of Odysseus. Let me just open my book. Okie doke, and let's read. When the sail filled again, we knew we were safe. My men untied me. I didn't have long to regain my composure. Soon, a rock column rose above the horizon, the sides smooth, the summit shrouded in smoke. I walked between the benches with a brave word for each of my companions. Then I stood before them and said, "My friends, these straits we approach pose a great danger, but surely no greater than the Cyclops, and we defeated him. Helmsman, steer a course towards the column of rocked port. There is a whirlpool to starboard. Oarsmen, your lives depend on the strength of your arms." I didn't tell them about the dragon who waited for us on top of that tower. If I had, they would have hidden wherever they could, and I needed strength of every man to break the whirlpool's grip. Despite Circe's warning, I put on the breastplate and a helmet. I took a spear in each hand and scanned the smoke, hoping that I could fend Scylla off before she struck. Then the air became clammy. The ship shook. The water around us was white, hissing and boiling. We saw the whirlpool. She was magnificent and beautiful, awful and terrible. She sucked down the ocean with such ferocity that we glimpsed the seabed. Then she spat it into the sky so it fell on our cheeks like salty rain. We watched her transfixed. Then the dragon struck. Quick as thought, she lunged from her cave. Each of her 6 savage heads plucked one of my men from his bench. When they screamed, I turned and looked. For a moment, I glimpsed her ancient, mocking eyes, her fiery skin, the flailing limbs of one of my friends between her jaws, and she was gone into the smoke. I fought in a war for 10 years. I saw men do awful things to other men, but I never saw a sight as terrible as that. They died screaming my name. The sound of their screams still haunts my dreams. Okay, and a very quick chapter, but that is the end of that chapter there. Okay, so unfortunately, Odysseus didn't warn his men about the dragon, even though he knew that the dragon was there and he knew that his men would die. He didn't warn his men, and 6 of his men had died because of that. So what I want you to do now is imagine that you were Odysseus, and I want you to think, what choice would you have made? So would you have warned the other men about the 6-headed dragon and those dangers? Or would you have done what Odysseus did and sacrificed them? Okay, what would you have done? Okay, and once you've thought about that, okay, try and think to me why. Why would you make that decision? Why would you warn your men, or why wouldn't you warn your men? Okay, why did you make that choice? Write down then, this is going to be your first task, to write down the pros and cons behind each decision. Okay, refer back to both chapter 6 and chapter 7 to help you, which is why I left that chapter at the beginning of the book. So in your Google document, you'll have something like this on Google Classroom. You'll have a table that looks like this. I've just added in some ideas for you. Okay, so to warn my crewmates, some ideas. So I would warn my crewmates. Warning my crewmates would stop 6 of them being eaten by a dragon. Warning my crewmates would make us stronger as a team because there would be trust between us. And perhaps Cirque could be lying. Why should we trust her? Okay, I can tell my crewmates because Cirque's probably just telling a lie. Here we've got this side, which is not warning my crewmates, would mean that only 6 of us would die and not the whole crew. But obviously, if you didn't warn them, then they would perhaps, all of them might die. Okay, would not warning them would scare them, so they wouldn't be worrying about their lives. And even if Cirque is lying, we don't know, and it is not worth the risk. So it's an opposing argument. Okay, it's a counter argument to this argument here. So what I want you to do in your books, or not in your books, or in the Google document, is write down some ideas, so at least 5 from each side, giving you why you would warn your crewmates or why you wouldn't warn your crewmates, and use the book to help you think of some ideas. Okay, so you should have done that now. You should have come up with some really good ideas about why you would and wouldn't warn your crewmates about the dangers. And then what you're going to do is you're going to write your own debate. So what you're going to do, you're going to choose one of the 2 sides of the argument. Okay, so you're going to choose whether you want to warn them or not warn them, and then you're going to write out a speech as part of a debate. Argue why you believe you should warn the men or why you believe that you shouldn't. Okay, imagine that you're actually trying to persuade Odysseus to do what you think he should do. Okay, so just a reminder of the features of debate. So you'll start with your opening statement. So it'll be something like, I believe that Odysseus should warn his men, and then just say because, and just highlight quickly your main arguments. Don't go into much detail because that's what you're going to do here. Your first argument here. So argue your first point. Okay, sorry about that. I just have to pause the video because somebody was asking a question. So yeah, opening statement, explaining what you believe, which argument what is your argument. Okay, highlight your main points. Then you move on to your first argument. So use this table to help you. Use one of these arguments and then back it up with evidence from the text. So all of this has to be factual. You can't make up any arguments. They've all got to be facts. So choose one of the points that you've made and then back it up with evidence from the text, and then do that again for another argument. You could do that for as many arguments as you want, explaining why you believe. So you might say, for example, I believe that Odysseus should warn his men of the dangers, because if he warns his men, it will stop 6 of his crewmates dying. This is very, very, very important because then he'll have more men to then fight the dragon himself. Okay, that's just an example. Okay, I also want you to try and do a counter argument. So look back at one of the arguments you've made here on the other side, the side that you're not arguing about, and try and come up with an argument against that. Okay, so you're forming a counter argument, an argument against an argument from the opposing side. So you could argue, so you might say, for example, you could argue that Odysseus should tell his men because then 6 of those men won't die. However, that will mean that the whole crew will then later die because they'll get sucked into the whirlpool, for example. Okay, and then finally, just do a conclusion, a few lines, just summarizing your argument with a powerful statement at the end. You've got to really, this is where you're really trying to persuade Odysseus that you should do this or you shouldn't do this. Okay, really end it with a powerful statement. Okay, and that's what I'd like you to do for me then, Year 5. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you in the live lesson. Enjoy the rest of your day.